here with Wayne Issleb, and he portrays General Grant. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, you know, I've been a reenactor for about 15 years now, and I've been doing Grant for about six years. And everybody said that if you grew out a beard, and I've always been a historian of his, you know, a fascinating character of American history by all means. And so since I knew so much about him, and I wanted to, you know, gain the look, so I grew out the beard and grabbed a cigar and threw some stars on my shoulder, and I've been doing Grant for 6 years now, all over the country. I do about 20 events, plus I do a play called An Evening with General Grant, which is usually the off season. So I do it for historical societies and so forth, playhouses.
Yes, we've talked about
we do it for fundraisers. You know, I volunteer. It's a great play with some special effects. I have other characters in it, and it's just a progression of Grant's life. He had just finished his memoirs in 1885 in McGregor, New York, and he reminisces his life right after he finished his memoirs, and then dies 7 days later. True history.
Okay.
And I do everything in the Midwest. This year I'll be in Minnesota. I do an event in Waynesville, Missouri. So I do about 5 states.
Wow,
every summer
quite the
season.
Travel.
Yeah.
So, was he somebody you really admired growing up?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. When I first became a Civil War reenactor with the 36th Wisconsin in the late 90s, I was very fascinated about General Grant. And there were some other reenactors out there that did him and still do today. So we kind of avoid events. I do my events, they do theirs. But it's just a fascinating character in American history. He is the true story of what. First off, he was terrible at just about everything he did except war. You know, seriously. I mean, the Civil War and his wartime in the Mexican-American War is where he excelled. In private life, he was horrible.
All right.
And the rumors of him being a drunk and everything like that was pretty much true. But during the Civil War, he drank very little. Not to say he didn't drink.
Really?
But he didn't drink to what history says he did. Let's put it that way.
That is always one of those things. What's in the flask? You know.
Right.
Yes.
And I get that all. Where's your whiskey kind of thing.
Yes.
And he was with Lincoln, he was. So many congressmen and senators said, you got to get rid of this guy. You got to get rid of him. He's a drunk. And they would have spies in his camp sent from senators from Washington during the war. And they would all come back and say, sober, you know, all these rumors are not true. So and Lincoln's famous quote was, you know, we need him, he fights. And, you know, if my other generals would fight like him, well, let's get them whiskey and let them start drinking too, along those lines. Yeah. Now,
have you ever gone to portray him during his presidency?
Yes, I actually do President Grant with the Buffalo Bill Wild West shows. That's that era. In the play, Evening with General Grant, certainly I do him as president. I talk about his presidency. I kind of like doing his presidency because I'm at the age where he was president. I'm 49, so he was president, 49, 50, so on. He was in his early 40s during the Civil War. And because I have a few extra pounds, I look more like President Grant than I would General Grant. He was 5'9", 5'10", probably 120 pounds.
Oh, really?
So when he became president, he ate a lot more.
Yeah, more sedentary.
Yeah, so I kind of have this as President Grant. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So which is your favorite to portray?
It depends on the reenactment. I mean, I can speak at any terms of his life, you know, and portray any era, any war. If this was Vicksburg or if this was any of his battles, I could portray it as a particular battle. Whether it be a 1-star, 2-star, or 3 stars, because he only had 3 stars the last year of the war.
Right.
Most of the war, he was a major general with 2 stars, and that was. His Vicksburg campaign and stuff. I enjoy doing President Grant because you can reflect on that era plus Civil War. Because if people come up to me dressed like this and they ask about my presidency, I'd say I have no ambition to be president. You know, by all means, why would I take that job away from Lincoln? I see him serving at least 4 terms. And I had no ambitions. Grant had no ambitions in politics whatsoever. During the Civil War. He was kind of forced into it after the war, after Johnson, and he felt it was his duty to the country, very much like George Washington did not want to be president.
Okay.
And Grant kind of felt the same way, like, who else is going to fill those shoes? To bring the country together at such a trying period.
And he was so well known that people trusted him.
Oh, he did no campaigning whatsoever.
No, I wouldn't think he would have.
He was the most popular person in the world after the Civil War. Yes, and indeed he was more popular than Abraham Lincoln.
Wow.
Yeah, in the 1870s during his presidency. Remember, he was a two-term president. And after his world tour through Europe, when he came back in 1880, they wanted him to run again.
Okay.
And especially his wife Julia, but Grant denied that. He said, I'm done with politics. Private sector for me. And of course, 5 years later, he passed away.
After he was president, what did he do with himself after that?
Well, he wanted to be a businessman. I mean, he joined his son in an investment firm in 1883. Which kind of turned out to be a Ponzi scheme. So at the point in 1883, Grant thought he was worth over $2 million. Most happiest time of his life, as title only with his son. And his son's partner was kind of a shady guy. Comes to find out that all the wealth that in the investment firm was just on paper only. And everybody invested into that firm when he put his name on the letterhead. All the veterans of the war invested money. He felt so horrible to find out. He actually borrowed $150,000 from the Vanderbilts right after the whole thing collapsed to put it into the bank. The next day it was gone. He just realized there was no point of putting any money to it, and he was just completely ashamed. But one thing about Grant, he had no problem taking handouts and donations from people. He felt that the country owed him for his service. So when people would feel sorry for him and throw him $5 here, $10 here, or even a box of cigars, he would gladly take it because you got to remember there was no pension back then.
Oh, that makes sense then.
So he felt that the country owed him, and if the citizen wanted to give him $20, he gladly took it.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a little known fact then about Grant.
Exactly, yeah.
So, did you enjoy camping and that kind of thing before you started to do this?
I stopped Civil War reenacting for quite some time, and then when it came to the 150th anniversary, I got it back into it. We tried to get the reenactors all together from the old 36 and got a handful of them, and I just finally said, you know what, I'm going to kind of go on my own, start my own little thing, and just do Grant. Yeah.
Do you travel with other people doing this?
Yeah, I usually have 3 or 4 people that come with me because I can't set the camp up myself. You know, and they're usually the younger boys who will portray infantry soldiers. Sometimes I'll have a staff officer because, of course, when Grant would travel, he'd have many people with him. The whole entourage was like a mobile office. So he would have 20 people with him at all times at his camp. Including generals and his staff and so forth. So it's hard to get a lot of people to portray that. But usually they come to camp, they see me.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's all very fascinating. I love the way that you portray and all of your retinue and that you usually typically bring with you. And you're so good at talking with people. Is that something that you enjoyed throughout your life, or is it something you kind of worked up into?
Well, when I first started portraying Grant, it was really hard for me to break from just being an educator about the Civil War, which most reenactors do. They don't actually fall into a particular character. When you portray somebody who is so well known in American history, you have to be really careful because a lot of times when you're asked questions about Grant, they already know the answer. They're testing you. They're testing you. And I have not been so much challenged to the point where I didn't have an answer. Unless it was like, what was your daughter's, brother's, father's, dog's name? Who knows? But you keep along the Grant family, his entire life, I could pretty much answer anything. But it's really hard to step out of Wayne and then be Ulysses. And it took a while for me to, I'm falling back into, Wayne, I should be Ulysses S. Grant. But I can usually do that in front of an audience. And
first person for me has always been very difficult. I am more along the lines of the educator. Feeling.
And we all start out that way.
Absolutely.
That's our hobby. We want to teach people our hobby, but to portray somebody, especially somebody so well known. I mean, it's like, you got to be that person because they're going to ask a question they know the answer to.
Well, I have to say, overall appearance definitely could be mistaken. That's Grant.
Besides the whiskey.
Well, besides the whiskey.
I got to be sober here,
And so when I see you in your normal street clothes, it's very disconcerting.
It's like, who's that?
Really, there's something wrong with that. But so where are you from?
I'm from like the Kenosha area.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so were you born and raised there? Or did you
just over the border. You know,
Okay.
in Illinois, northern Illinois is where I was born and raised, and then I moved to Wisconsin. I've been in Wisconsin right now for 18 years.
Okay.
Just over the border.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you have family?
Yeah, I have brothers and sisters in the northern Illinois area, and I have one sister that lives in northern Wisconsin.
Okay.
So they're kind of spread out. I'm kind of in between all of them.
Do they think you're very strange for doing what you do?
Well, at first they did.
Yeah. That is a very typical.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then that Facebook's become very popular, where a lot of my events and photos are. Now they kind of laugh about it.
Yeah.
In fact, my niece came up to me and they said that they were studying the Civil War and they all had their laptop computers and they had to Google General Grant.
Oh.
And then under photos and on the very first page there's my face and my niece is in school and she's like, that's my uncle. Because if you Google General Grant or reenactor, I mean, I'm on the first page.
Sure.
Several photos and then they're laughing. Well, there's my uncle.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So.
Well, you are the most well-known General Grant that I have come across.
Okay.
So I don't know however many are out there.
There's a few. There's a Kurt Fields, Dr. Kurt Fields, who's in the Tennessee area.
Okay.
Now he works with a lot of state parks. He's probably the best Grant reenactor in the Midwest, if not the entire country, because he goes from California all over the place. In fact, he does it full time. Spit an image of the guy. He's got a doctorate in history and knows Grant up and down.
Sure.
That's one guy that I think if I met, I'd be quite intimidated with. Although I've met him a couple times in Gettysburg.
Okay.
Really nice guy. And there's a few others out there, but there's a couple Grants that actually within the last few years had retired. Mm-hmm. And the events had called me and said, hey, you know, we had so and so. Would you like to fill in his shoes for our annual event?
Sure.
Depending on the dates and commitments, I picked up a few events that way.
Okay. Well, that's I kind of lost of where I was going with this, but how long have you been coming to Horicon Living History Days?
This is my third year.
Third year.
Yeah, because your last year that we were in the other park, we were there.
Yes.
And then last year I was here, I think, just for one day. And then I'll just be here for.
Do you do this every weekend?
Well, it seems that way in the summer. This is kind of the kickoff. The last weekend in April, I do Grant's home front in Galena, his hometown. Okay. And I portray Grant for that. And then I go all the way up till the end of October with events. So 20 some events plus the plays that I do as Grant, and then all the stuff in the winter. It keeps me busy.
I was going to say, do you even have an off season?
Probably from fall through winter.
Yeah.
But that's where I do a lot of the indoor events.
Sure.
Yeah. So I would say, if not every weekend in June, July, and August, certainly every other weekend, every other month.
Well, do you have like a Facebook page people can learn about you on? Yeah.
You could just go to Wayne Issleb, just kind of Facebook page that, and you'll see a lot of the events that I do.
Okay.
Contact information is in there. And, I'm open for events and all kinds of stuff. I'm very budget friendly.
Sure.
So I can help people out if they're doing some sort of fundraiser. And also the 70-minute presentation of Evening with General Grant is incredible. It has 5 actors plus myself.
Sounds really
props,
exciting.
Sound effects.
Wow.
And let's just say the ghost and voice of Lincoln is also in it.
Wow, it sounds very exciting. We'll have to
very neat.
Look into that.
And you can get that on top of my web page.
Okay.
Facebook page.
Well, very good. So thank you very much
Thank you for
coming.
having me. I'm enjoying myself.
What's your famous General Grant speech?
The famous Grant speech?
Yes.
Well, Grant never liked to do public speaking. So when the press would come around after a battle or he would visit a community, the press and the locals would be there and say, Grant, speech, Grant. So Grant would do exactly this, and this was dubbed Grant's famous speech. He would get off his chair and say, I stand to this occasion to say that I have nothing to say.
Oh, yes,
and he would sit back down.
Yes.
And it would be, the local reporters would have to give something to their editor. So they would make up their own speech that Grant gave. And a couple days later, Grant would pick up the page and read a speech that he never gave. Back then, they called that fake news.
Yeah, well.
I don't know what you call it today.
Apparently, that's still the thing.
Is it? Okay. Yeah.
So, well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this event.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear it.
Thank you.